Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
True. Good point.
45,
Good
both
question.
the
Good question. Good question. I mean, you need some area, I guess, to have both factions so you can kind of deliberate. But then why not have it more in the middle instead of in the eastern part?
USSR
Sorry, that was kind of just went into the video. Go. Original link to the video, top the description, below that link to the Discord. Click on it, send you right over there. I'd love to have you. History Matters, awesome channel. I have not watched or reacted to a channel more than this one. Let's go.
in early 1945, both the USSR in the east and the US-led allies in the west were racing to capture Berlin. As you'll know, the USSR got there first and took the city in April of that year. Yet, after the war was over, Berlin didn't simply remain a part of the USSR's occupation zone or even East Germany, but was itself also divided between the victorious powers. Which raises the question, why? Why did the Soviet Union hand over West Berlin to the Allies when it already controlled it?
Yeah, I'm going to make a guess. My guess is that it was kind of the center of Germany before, and so it might be a good place to organize what happens in Germany as a whole after the war. That's my best guess, but yeah, I've never really thought about this that much. Yeah, go.
So, why did the Soviet Union hand over West Berlin to the Allies when it already controlled it? So, it won't surprise you to know that Berlin being the capital of Germany meant that it had a symbolic status to the victorious powers. As such, when both sides were discussing how Germany would be divided, it was agreed that Berlin would also be shared. Everyone had agreed to this because nobody knew who would get to Berlin first, and so making sure everybody got a slice of it seemed fairest. That said,
that explains a lot. That explains it all, actually. I did not know that. You could end the video right there and I learned the main thing. Okay.
Stalin wasn't exactly famous for being a man of his word. And so when Soviet troops captured the city, he wasn't exactly famous for being a man of his word. And so when Soviet troops captured the city, he had to choose to hand most of it over to the Western Allies. And his reasons for doing so were actually quite simple. First of all, there was still a war going on. In the east, Japan was still warring away, and so both the...
Wait, so... reaching Berlin first is even more consequential than I thought, because... so they were so uncertain that they said, you know, no matter who gets there first, we split it up in joint occupation. But if the Americans got there first, then would there have been no East and West Germany? Like, would they have just separated, you know, USSR controls the Poland area and we control Western Europe, or, you know, Poland and Eastern Europe, and then Germany, Western? Never thought about that.
The Western Allies and the USSR needed to get on. In the east, Japan was still warring away, and so both the Western Allies and the USSR needed to get along. The Soviet Union saw a massive opportunity in controlling massive amounts of territory in China, Korea, and also potentially Japan. And thus, alienating Washington, London, and Paris wasn't going to make the post-war recognition of any changes easier. As such, Stalin honoured his previous agreements because handing over a chunk of a city in return for a chunk of a continent seemed like a good trade. Secondly, Stalin believed...
How does that make any sense, dude? If I heard that right, which I did, I'm certain I did, then if it was agreed that you would separate Berlin before you get there, I'm not saying that the U.S. would have played, maybe the U.S. would have done the same thing. Like, I have no way of knowing that. Like, if the U.S. got to Berlin, maybe the U.S. would be like, I don't know if I want to hand all this over, right? Or half of it. So I'm not necessarily just saying, oh, wow, Soviet Union. But in the agreement, whoever reaches there first, you split it up. But now you're trying to use that as a bargaining chip to get this area in East Asia. Doesn't make a lot of sense, Stalin.
Over a chunk of a city in return for a chunk of a continent seemed like a good trade. Secondly, Stalin believed that the division of Berlin was only a temporary measure. The Allies were simply doing so to show unity, and it was an inevitability that cooler heads would prevail and Berlin would be reunited.
I don't know how specific the agreement was. Obviously, they didn't even know if it would be successful. I don't know how specific the agreement was, on how they would divide Berlin and how long they would divide Berlin. So I can see that as plausible question by Stalin. Okay.
The plan was never to divide Germany up permanently, and Stalin had hoped that a reunited Germany would soon become communist, and by extension under his control. As such, handing over West Berlin wasn't seen as a concession but as a goodwill gesture to the Soviet Union's partners. Furthermore, given that West Berlin was well within the USSR's occupation zone, Stalin knew that he could simply starve the Western powers out with the stroke of a pen.
No, because we'll use planes.
When it became clear that Germany's division was going to become permanent and that the West was going to incorporate their Germany into an anti-Soviet bloc, he closed the west of the city off. And the US knew that without having the ability to bring in food, they'd have to leave. Or at least they would have, had Stalin not made one tactical blunder. He forgot the sky existed. As a result of the blockade, the US and Royal Air Forces airdropped food and supplies into Berlin for just under a year until Stalin relented. And it was at this point that Stalin had realised his mistake. Western occupation of Berlin wasn't just symbolic of Germany's defeat, but also of their commitment to resisting the USSR. And without any way of removing the West without full-scale war, the plan was to make staying there as difficult as possible. This was done by holding up shipments and making the red tape oppressively hard to navigate. This ultimately didn't work, which is why in 1958 Stalin's successor Nikita Khrushchev issued an ultimatum to the West. Leave Berlin or we'll do something. The Allies said no, and when the deadline passed and nothing happened, well, that was it. And eventually the
It's so strange for like humanity up until 1945, whenever the nuclear bomb was created. Like it's like the rules are totally changed at once the bomb is created. Like we created a weapon that was so strong that when both sides have it, which happened, then it's like, okay, but if we come in contact with each other, then we're both gonna lose. And so it's so weird. Like, imagine all of the wars that would have, like, there definitely would have been a World War III if the atomic bomb wasn't invented. I don't know, definitely. I would guess. Because it's now like, oh, you better get out, or what? Or we'll declare, oh, wait, I can't do that anymore. I forgot, you know? Like, the creation of the atomic bomb is such a giant point in human history, like of warfare, which has been as old as humanity, just completely changed.
USSR just sort of had to accept that it made a mistake handing over half of Berlin, because the Western powers weren't going anywhere. I hope you enjoyed this episode with the special...
Thank you for making... You always say thanks for watching. So when it comes to this part, like right after World War II, I really... Come on. So, you know, like the Iron Curtain goes up, you know, like the Eastern Bloc countries, and then the more communist Eastern countries, and the more capitalist Western countries. And I know obviously the US is on one side of the Cold War, but at this moment, I don't really know, I can't really say that the Allies are free of blame of increasing tension. Because as little as I might be able to empathize with Russia or like put myself in Russian shoes because I'm so like I've lived in the West my entire life, I'm still able to be like, stop myself and be like, just because, you know, doesn't mean everything your side does is right. And so putting myself in their shoes or yourself in their shoes, you have to realize that you're afraid of them just like they're afraid of you, you know? And so I don't know what could have been done better, but I'm definitely not clearing the Allies from unnecessarily increasing tension. Does that make sense? Awesome video. Love it. And I'll see you guys next time, all right? Bye, guys.